In every corner of America, there are stories of resilience, innovation, and the unwavering spirit of community. Stories of people and places transformed by the power of connection, collaboration, and a shared vision for a better future. We'll uncover the blueprint for building thriving communities, one story at a time.
Welcome back to The Community Effect. I'm Marietta Rodriguez, President and CEO of NeighborWorks America. This February, as we celebrate Black History Month, we highlight extraordinary leaders in affordable housing and community development. Today's guest is Darryl Smith, Chief Executive Officer of HomeSight, a NeighborWorks Network member based in Seattle. Darryl has a fascinating and inspiring journey. Since taking the helm at HomeSight in 2020, Darryl has spearheaded efforts to expand homeownership opportunities, innovate housing solutions, and strengthen communities in the Pacific Northwest. Darryl, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you, Marietta. It's so good to be here. Really appreciate it.
Darryl, your path to affordable housing and community development is anything but traditional. Let's start with your roots and your journey. How did that begin?
It's definitely a circuitous route to the role that I play now. I actually began my professional life in the performing arts. As you mentioned, I was trained at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and I traveled from my hometown of Englewood, New Jersey, to the West Coast, where I trained for 2 years to really be a stage actor and worked in the professional theater in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, and then eventually here in Seattle, Washington. And I sort of fell into real estate and community development work because I was performing at a theater here in Seattle called A Contemporary Theater. And I needed a bit of a day job. And so I thought, let me see about getting a real estate license, because about a year prior, my wife and I were renters, and we had moved to the most diverse section of Seattle, the Rainier Valley, and we purchased an old funky fixer bungalow. And I felt like if I could do that for myself and my wife, maybe I could help someone else. And so that's kind of how I got into real estate. I got a real estate license and began my work as a broker, kind of Rainier Valley's hometown realtor, helping other not very well-to-do creative types like myself.
I have a couple of friends who are also actors. What was your favorite role, and how did your experience in the performing arts shape your perspective on community and storytelling?
That's a great question. I loved pretty much all of the roles I had the opportunity to play, but let me tell you about one that was the scariest thing I've ever done in the theater. Here in Seattle, I got an amazing opportunity to audition for the late, great August Wilson, who was in residence here at Seattle Repertory Theater for the last years of his life, creating his African-American cycle. I auditioned for August Wilson directly. He was in the audience, which was nerve-wracking enough. But it was for a play called Seven Guitars, which is really the story of the seven voices telling the African-American experience. And I was hired to be the understudy for all of the male roles. Terrifying, because you have to learn a tremendous amount of script material, and you don't get nearly as much rehearsal as the folks that are cast in that role. But what it did for me is every night, night after night, I would sit way up high in the booth watching the show, making sure I'm understanding the blocking and trying my best to memorize lines. But what was really powerful for me was August's amazing storytelling ability, and you get to see that play out on stage, all of those different voices telling this very moving story of the African-American experience. And so, in a sense, that power of storytelling is something that I've carried with me, and perhaps it was already there from a younger age, but it was really solidified for me watching that take place. And so I think of myself as HomeSight's chief storyteller, talking about community development and housing and the important role that it plays in communities far and wide. And so that's a skill that I get to take with me and to put in practice in terms of what we do at HomeSight. So it's powerful because we connect as human beings through story. And when you're talking about some things that can be very technical and what have you, I think it always behooves you to connect it on a human being level, on an emotional level, and when you talk about impact and the things you'd like to do with programming.
I think that's absolutely true. So you've told us a little bit your journey led you to real estate where you worked with HomeSight, but in a slightly different way. Tell us about that chapter and how it set the stage for you to become CEO.
So we've got to put about 25 years between my first encounter with HomeSight and where I sit today, because in the 90s, when I was a working real estate broker, I was approached by HomeSight. Actually, my managing broker got in touch with me and said, "Hey, HomeSight, which is a local nonprofit, they build homes, and they've got these 4 homes they want to market just above the Amy Yee Tennis Center right here in Southeast Seattle. They're looking for somebody who really understands the community and the neighborhood." And I was already thinking of myself as sort of an advocate for the Rainier Valley and for the Columbia City area, the neighborhood that I still live in today. And so I went and had the interview with HomeSight. Happily, HomeSight hired me. And because I had neighborhood connections and knew the community, knew the schools, the restaurants, the park areas, because I was a resident here as well, that went into my marketing of these properties. So that was my first relationship with HomeSight. And now, lots of years have passed. The board saw fit to hire me as a CEO of HomeSight, and it's been absolutely the greatest job of my life. And this brings together so much of what I love about the work that we do as an organization, serving community, really making a difference in terms of impact and building partnerships and bringing all of that together, the storytelling work, the technical piece. Makes it really easy to get up in the morning, I'll say that much.
At a certain point, you realized that affordable housing and community development was ultimately where you wanted to make your biggest contributions. Was there a particular moment that happened, or was it just the natural progression?
This is the funny part. And full disclosure, I think all of the work I had done prior to coming to HomeSite, I served as a Seattle Planning Commissioner, helped run a nonprofit. I had served for 4 years as the deputy mayor of the city of Seattle. I'd run for public office, all of these things. I'd done real estate for about 13, 14 years. I really had no idea that this stuff was called community development. I did not connect those dots. Nobody said, "Oh, all that stuff you've been doing over your career, that's actually community development." I didn't know that. So to be awakened to the fact that that is actually a pursuit and a profession, and a very noble one, was just this really wonderful, illuminating moment to say, "Wow, all the stuff I've been doing, it kind of does make sense." So when the opportunity came to lead HomeSite and then bring together all that we do in community development as a lender, as a developer, as a builder, as an innovator, I just couldn't imagine that it could be this good, frankly, that we could have an impact in these 3 specific areas. So I view us as an innovator in all of these spaces. We're supposed to take more risk. We're supposed to actually create space in the market that otherwise would not be created, whether it's in the way we build and develop, how we do outreach and engagement with community, how we do economic development, and then being creative as a lender, responding to community need. All of these things coming together is just about the best thing I can imagine doing.
That's a great story and a great connection. I think oftentimes when we're children growing up in a home or apartment, that can be a very formative time of thinking about what home is or what home feels like. Tell us about the house you grew up in. How did those early experiences shape your understanding of what home means?
The house that I grew up in Englewood, New Jersey, which was surrounded by a very, very diverse community in our neighborhood, my parents were able to get that house because my mother went to work in the Farber Pen Factory, which was owned by a gentleman who took a liking to my mom and understood her brilliance, and actually went to a bank in my hometown, got a mortgage, and assigned it to my mother. That's how my parents became homeowners, right? And so I think about all of the workarounds and the hoops and we could go down a completely, additional show about the challenges that it's been for many in the Black community and many other communities to attain home ownership and build generational wealth. The home I grew up in started there, but it was filled with music, and it was filled with theater, and it was filled with art. And I always have very, very strong and fond memories of the gatherings that happened in my home.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and share a similar story in that my parents are able to buy their first home utilizing my father's GI Bill, the VA financing. That's how they bought their first home. So, HomeSight has become a model for innovative approaches to affordable housing and community development, particularly in a high cost market that is Seattle. Let's explore some of the ways that you're building capacity and opportunities for homeownership. I know that HomeSight is a community development financial institution, or a CDFI. For those that may be unfamiliar about what a CDFI is or does, how does that differ from other organizations in the community?
Yeah, CDFIs are a little bit of a different animal. We don't function like a bank. We actually function like a mortgage lender, but with specific targets in mind. And we particularly serve low and moderate income folks across the state of Washington. What we try to do is be as innovative as we can, come up with programs and design programs that specifically address community needs. So, for example, we're a correspondent lender for the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. We originate a lot of their loans, which are below market interest loans. And what's different about a CDFI is that we actually get deep into community. We get into churches and fairs and other places that banks don't necessarily go, to connect directly with community and let them know about the opportunities that are out there. So we also bring a tremendous amount of down payment assistance in different flavors, if you will, to pretty much every mortgage that we do. Typically, when I sign off on a first mortgage, there are one, two, three, four, sometimes five other layers of down payment assistance underneath that first mortgage to close the gap. Because in Seattle King County, where we sit, we're serving one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. The median home price in Seattle King County is over $950,000, right? And it puts tremendous pressure on anything that's below $950,000. And so we have to close the gap in affordability for our customers. And so all of our down payment assistance, this gets a little bit technical, but is capped at 80% area median income. So if you make more than 80% area median income, even though we have a lot of down payment assistance available, it sort of stops at 80%. So we are not serving what we would call middle class buyers that make a little bit more than 80% area median income. So I went back to my old company, Windermere Real Estate. There was an agent that had approached HomeSight saying, hey, I'd like to help one low and moderate income family, a Black family in the Central District, which is the traditional African-American neighborhood here in Seattle, purchase a home, right? And that conversation led to others with Windermere and their foundation. And now we've struck a partnership where we've created a down payment assistance fund specifically to serve people between 80 and 120% area median income to try to close that gap. So it's just one example of how we as a CDFI lender have pivoted to address community need.
I know another standout program is your halal loan, which supports Muslim homebuyers. Tell us a little bit about that initiative and its impact.
Yeah, it took us a few years to get this one figured out. But what we do here is, and first of all, a little bit of background. We have a very large population of Somali residents and others from Africa and other countries as well that can't pay interest. It just doesn't work for them religiously. So what we decided to do was to do a lot of research and look for a partner. So we found that partner in an organization called Ijara. They're based in Dearborn, Michigan. And our representative out there, Shob Sharif, with his help, we've put together what we call our halal loan. But the way this works is Shob actually flies out from Dearborn, Michigan a couple times a year, comes to Seattle. And as a CDFI, another example of what a bank may not do is we actually put together tours of mosques, area mosques in our 3-county area. So Shob and our director of lending partnerships, Moussa Sam, who originally is from Senegal, can go into the mosque and talk to the community members about this homeownership opportunity. The buyer actually pays Ijara, and Ijara actually pays the note. So there's no riba associated with it. There's no interest associated with the loan itself. It's Fannie and Freddie approved, which is amazing because we can sell those loans and create more capital for ourselves to do more of the halal loan, which is really, really important.
Darryl, The Northeast concept of co-ops was something that you understood coming from New Jersey, and you integrated it into your work in Washington with one of the Pacific Northwest's first limited equity co-op. Tell us how that works and what role does this model play in addressing affordability in your really high cost market?
Thank you for mentioning it. We named this project Olu, which means to gather in the Lusutchi, which is the Coast Salish language. And the idea here is we wanted a gathering place for community where they could take root and frankly come back to. And so the idea of a limited equity cooperative in an incredibly expensive housing market is something that HomeSight has worked on for several years now. We wanted to get into multifamily development, given the price of everything, of construction costs and land being so high here, that if you could build with greater efficiency and economies of scale, you could really create a project and a program that would serve communities. So this is 68 units, beautifully designed, biophilic, look toward the population that inhabited the land first. It's adjacent to light rail right here in Southeast Seattle. And the way this works very simply is because it's a co-op and it's shared equity housing, meaning a blanket mortgage over the whole building, the entry point for ownership is such that you own shares like a cooperative back in New York City. There's plenty of them in Philly and New York and probably Chicago as well, but very, very few of them here in the Pacific Northwest. And so by owning those shares, you have the right to stay in your home for your lifetime. You can also hand those shares to your heirs. So you're building equity. And you can, if you choose to, sell your shares in the market. What we do is the entry point, it is limited by your income. You can only make 80% of area median income to become an owner in the co-op because we're creating permanent affordable housing. And on the back end, if you decide to sell, you get your investment back plus 2% per year. What we're doing here is creating permanent affordability, both coming in and the limited nature of the investment on the way back out, if you sell, allows for the next family to come in. And so think about our pricing here. For example, you can purchase at Olu and get a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, beautifully finished unit in a sustainably built building adjacent to light rail with bike parking and everything for about $110,000.
Wow.
It's amazing, right? Because when I started real estate in 1995, that's the kind of pricing we'd be looking at. So this is a concept, and we've been very, very happy with the response from the community, because what we're also using as a housing innovator is something the city of Seattle passed, a program that allows for us to serve community members with community impact first. So we can set aside half of the units, according to the city of Seattle, to serve you first. So if you used to live in the neighborhood, but you were pushed out because of the increasing pricing, and you still get services here in the community, then you qualify. If you live way outside of the city of Seattle and your job is there, but you can no longer afford to live in the city of Seattle, we can serve you first so you can come back to the community as well. So it's an anti-displacement policy and tool that we're using. So there's a lot of things that are going into the delivery of Olu, and we hope to break ground on it next March. And the groundbreaking won't be just the usual suspects of the funders of the development, but we want to have community members that are going to be owners digging those shovels in the ground too. I can't wait for that day.
That sounds very, very exciting and very innovative. Darryl, you've certainly shared some of the housing challenges that buyers experience in the Northwest, and they are significant. What's the biggest challenge you face in keeping people housed in the Pacific Northwest?
We have a severe housing shortage here in the Pacific Northwest, and that's part of the reason why we are getting into multifamily development. We've developed over 450 units of housing over the years, all of it for home ownership so that families can build generational wealth through home ownership. And what happens when housing does come to the market, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on it. And on the rental side as well, I sit on the board of the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle King County, where I'm one of 3 providers in the housing sector that does home ownership. Everybody else does low to moderate income housing, and some of it's supportive housing for very low income or homeless. We're all feeling this level of pressure to create supply. So for us, it's a matter of being an innovator And when anyone asks us, how did you put together the secret sauce for being able to get OLU over the finish line, the limited equity cooperative, we'll share that information because these challenges are great. And we want other developers to come in and frankly copy what we've done and maybe do it even easier than we've done. We've taken a lot of bumps and bruises, to figure this out. And as a lender, same thing. There are huge challenges. I don't want to sugarcoat that, both on the supply side and the demand side, but we have a role to play here, and we will continue to do that.
And that's really a hallmark of the NeighborWorks network. The theme for NeighborWorks in 2025 is building. And so I think how you've described your pipeline, how you're contributing to that market in Seattle is incredibly important and significant. And I think what some people may not appreciate is putting units in the ground as a nonprofit developer is so much tougher than if you were building market rate housing. But the beneficiaries of these units, the people that will ultimately live in them, are critical members of the Seattle community, I'm guessing, right? Tell us a little bit about the customers that come to HomeSight that you help.
We just did a really well-attended webinar for staff members at the Seattle Housing Authority because the folks that work there also have a trouble, affording living in the city of Seattle. We've done direct outreach with what we call Pill Hill. Seattle's well known as a healthcare leader in the country. And so we've gone directly to hospitals to talk to their staff about ownership at OLU because you're exactly right, Marietta, that we are seeing as clients and customers, the police officer, the firefighter, the teacher, the folks that you really want to be close in your community, but would otherwise have a really difficult time staying. So that's our goal, to bring in folks that would normally be pushed out and not have an opportunity to have them come back and stay here in the Seattle market.
Let's look back at the work that you're doing, the trajectory of your career. For someone who's interested in a career in community development or affordable housing, what's the one piece of advice you would give them?
What we like to think about is how do we listen well? How do we partner well? How do we put other people first, right? And so I think if someone's really starting out and wanting to do community development work or real estate development work, having a really good set of ears, first of all, and a desire to want to partner with others and elevate them. If you have that as kind of like a foundational piece, you're probably going to be okay because, we can probably teach you some technical skills, right? What is more difficult, that is harder to teach, is that desire.
Darryl, your journey from the stage to CEO is a testament to how diverse experiences can lead to impactful leadership. Your work at HomeSight is not only building homes, but also building futures for families and communities. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
To our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about HomeSight's programs and impact, check out the show notes for links and resources. Thank you for joining us on The Community Effect. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to highlight the stories, partnerships, and innovations that strengthen communities and empower individuals. Remember, change begins at the community level, block by block, home by home.
This is The Community Effect, brought to you by NeighborWorks America.